Go ahead and keep talking.
So the first person who I'm aware of who used medical marijuana for epilepsy was a child named Jaden David, and his father Jason realized that I think after they had done it, I don't know why they did it or under what circumstances, but after they had done it and they realized that it worked, he started helping other people to get access in California. And then there was a mom in Colorado who had a child who had Dravet syndrome. Her name is Paige Figge. Her daughter's name is Charlotte. And Charlotte was essentially going to die. And she was. Our next step was to either put her in a medically induced coma, or to give her a medicine that was approved for veterinary purposes. And so Charlotte's mom and her dad read about how medical marijuana had helped this child in California, and they had friends who helped them to get access to it, and they tried it, and it worked. And so the first 7 days that she had the medicine, she didn't have any seizures. So from there it kind of spread, and so now there are kids in states all over the country that are using medical marijuana for seizure control, and it works very well in the vast majority of them. A lot of them are also on other pharmaceutical medications, and they're under the care of doctors. It's not like their parents are going rogue or anything, trying to do something that's outside of the norm, but it works, and in many cases it works better than the pharmaceutical drugs. And kids like mine, I've got 2 sons that are 3.5, and they have Miller-Dieker syndrome. It's a rare genetic disorder, and so for them, there are other kids who have that same disorder that are benefiting from medical marijuana now in places where it's legal and in some places where it's not. And so when my kids got surgery recently, back in January, for feeding tubes, they had to get that because seizures were robbing them of the ability to eat. I decided that I really wanted to make it accessible in Maryland, and so I worked very hard on the legislative side. I had a lot of people that were working with me on it, and we got medical marijuana passed this session in the Maryland legislature.
How exciting was that?
It was awesome.
That it was
really, really amazing. And Senator Young, as you mentioned, was very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
His wife Karen actually helped me to lobby the legislature. We also had support from Delegate Hogan, Delegate Brinkley. A number of legislators in Frederick County were big supporters, and then I also worked very closely with a group of parents. We formed a little group called Stop the Seizures, and so we would go and testify on the bills when they came up in front of the House and the Senate, and we would submit comments on everything. And I did a lot of media with the boys and with just myself. To raise awareness on the issue, and it was a long couple of months, and the bill passed on Monday.
So, your husband not involved in any of that at all?
My husband not so much. He's a stay-at-home dad, and he really had his hands full. He would have liked to, but it just didn't really. It just wasn't possible for both of us to be doing it at the same time.
Absolutely understand.
He came with me to the bill passage, and was a big support through the whole thing. But he's a little more shy, so he didn't really put himself in the media or anything like that.
That happens. So let's just talk a little bit about your boys, because, they're obviously your world, your everything. When did you start to notice the seizures, and when did you start to notice that maybe something wasn't exactly correct?
When they were 4 months old. Nicholas started to do this repetitive arm movement, and it didn't look normal to me. So I called his pediatrician, and they had me go down to Shady Grove Hospital because they had a neurologist on call. And we were there for a couple days, and while they were there, while he was there, he had a CAT scan done of his brain that looked abnormal. And then they did an MRI, and it was very abnormal. And so they diagnosed him there, and that was a very hard day. And then they did some genetic tests, and they found out that it was a Miller-Dieker lissencephaly. And then, since he had a twin, we had the twin tested as well, and his brother Byron also had it.
Is that a genetic disorder?
It's genetic, but it's spontaneous most of the time.
Okay. So how's that affected your life? Obviously you don't do the same day-to-day activities that you were doing before you noticed that, and things are definitely much different and you have to operate differently. What's that like?
At first, it was normal. It's just that the kids were developmentally delayed, but they were able to drink milk and, do some of the same things that every baby could do, which is why it took so long for us to figure it out. But then once the seizures really hit, their abilities declined, and they were not able to swallow as much. By the time they were 3, they were not able to eat very well, and they were starting to lose too much weight, and it's getting dangerous. But when they were little babies, they were just like little babies. They just never really developed head and neck control. But then as other kids progressed, they never progressed. So they never learned how to walk or talk or anything like that. And so as they get bigger and they have more seizures, the disease is progressive, it's terminal, and they've outlived the life expectancy for it. The average life expectancy is 2. There are other kids that lived a lot longer than that, but it's a really terrible form of epilepsy.
So how old are they now?
3.5.
3.5. Okay, so then how would medicinal marijuana benefit them?
Well, for the kids like mine that are taking it, in a couple of different ways. It decreases the frequency of seizures, it decreases the intensity of seizures, and it decreases the duration of seizures. And if you can prevent seizures from happening in the first place, that's the most powerful thing. Because once you have a seizure, you're more likely to have more. There's a kindling effect in the brain. It starts to spark off other seizures. So if you go through a period of having some strong seizures, you're likely to have a bunch of them. At least with the condition that my kids have. So all of that's really huge. Seizure control in general is huge because it's the seizures that take away all of the abilities that the kids have.
Makes sense. So how did you hear about medicinal marijuana to begin with? Did you just start doing research to try to find any cure for your children, to try to make it as life-abstaining as possible?
Not really, no. I mean, we knew that what they had was going to be tough, and we were following the doctor's advice on what to do. We have a really good neurologist at Children's Hospital, and she was helping us figure out how to medicate the kids properly, not over-medicate them. And so we really entrusted our doctors. Back in August of last year, I saw this special on CNN with Sanjay Gupta called Weed. And they had Charlotte Figi on there. And they showed how, in her particular case, the seizures had been reduced by medical marijuana. And my husband and I were like, what? Are you kidding me? And then I set off to learn everything that I could about it. And there was a group on Facebook called Pediatric Cannabis Therapy. And I found them, and I just started reading everything I could about it. And I read a ton of publications in PubMed and, things that were way over my abilities, but I did the best I could to try to digest them, to figure out why it is that the marijuana might be working and how it might work on kids. And then I started to make friendships with people who were in various parts of the country that were either trying to legalize it or who were using it. And at this point,